And with that, we have Mary Kay Cabot joining the show. Mary Kay, we were just discussing Tyvis's take of the Browns should trade for Tyreek Hill, and I'm curious.
I said no, Mary Kay. Tyvis and G both would trade for him.
What say you?
What would you do?
Well, I would first do my due diligence. I haven't really dug into exactly all that went on. I just saw an interview with Tyreek where he kind of walked away a little bit frustrated. But obviously there could be something that could happen there. I would want to do my homework and see where he's at, where his head is at. I sort of think that the Browns have to figure out where they're going at quarterback, what they want to do with their offense. But certainly a player with that kind of talent, I'm always all about upgrading the talent on the football team. If he's still got so much left in the tank, then I would certainly be looking into it.
Tyvis, you look like you won.
I mean, it's a no-brainer. Mary Kay, listen, tell me if you got a guy that's got a ton of speed out there, that wouldn't also back safeties up and help your run game out, which struggled this year. Yeah. Especially if you're going more to the Kevin Stefanski approach.
Bailey Zappi and DTR, he's going to do wonders for them.
It's not just them. It's not. First of all, it helps them out because when the last time you could just flip the ball out to a guy and be for a jailbreak and be like, oh man, he take
Jerry
this.
Jeudy.
Well, I think they lacked that kind of speed this year. And when you look at the Marvin Mims and those kind of guys that you just get the ball in their hands and they just fly, I do think the Browns need something like that. So I don't know if it would be Tyreek. I don't know if you want to give up those kind of assets and that kind of money. Again, I haven't really had a chance to dig into it yet because I've still been trying to sort through all the Deshaun Watson stuff and try to figure out what's going on there, what the future is going to hold with all of that. But when you look at a top talent in the NFL and that kind of speed, that kind of production, I would always be interested in digging into it.
No way he'd come here anyway.
You saw it.
No way.
Now, from fantasy football to the real gridiron, Mary Kay. Listen, I looked at what they said, and there was a lot of stuff been going around. People have been talking. You got Conklin, you got Andrew Berry spoke, you got Kevin Stefanski speaking, and then the news about Deshaun Watson having a setback. Mm-hmm. You look at it, and now we know the Browns have a number 2 overall pick. I mean, it would be like if Kevin Stefanski really wants his guy and he sees a guy in the draft that he likes, I mean, is there any way that you can go another route at number 2? Because people have been talking about the whole situation with Manning, Arch Manning, and maybe next year is a better look. But like we know, these picks don't come around every so often. This is a number 2 overall pick. You got the pick of the litter. Is this boiled down to if Kevin Stefanski likes a guy at quarterback, he just has to pull the trigger on it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you have the number 2 overall pick and you see a quarterback there that you think can turn into something for you, even if it's not necessarily for this season, if you see a future quarterback QB1 that can get you to the promised land, you have to pull the trigger on him at number 2. You don't hope to be drafting that high again anytime soon. They're going to try to get to winning in 2025. If that turns out to be the case, then you're going to want to take that quarterback this year because you're not going to have a crack at Arch Manning or whoever you like next year. So I think you're going to have to really dig into Shador. You're going to have to dig into Cam. You're going to have to see what you think about them, what you like about them. And there could be a sleeper quarterback in this draft that maybe the Browns like and other people aren't necessarily viewing as one of the top 2 right now. I don't know if that's the case, but I've found over the years that we don't really know what the NFL thinks of these quarterbacks until the NFL personnel guys and coaches get involved in the evaluation process. And that really starts in earnest at the Senior Bowl in a couple of weeks. So I think we need to wait and sort of see who starts to rise to the top and what everyone is thinking about some of these guys.
I can't wait to hear who you decide, because last time you wanted Josh Allen and you were right about that pick. So I'm interested to hear about who you decide out of this one. But speaking of people that's on the team right now, Myles, Garrett, and Joe Bonio, do you have any indications on what the future holds with them? Are they going to be with the Browns? Are they going to retire? Is it going to be a trade? Is it going to be an extension? Have you dug into those things with Myles and obviously weighed in on Joe Bonio?
Well, both of those guys heard in their exit meetings from the Cleveland Browns that the Browns are going to try to get to winning next year, which was the prerequisite for everything else. Then they're going to take their time. They're going to see how their bodies feel. They're going to see what comes next. And Myles, of course, told us after the game that extension talks are probably going to be part of whatever happens over the next couple of months with him. He's going to want to sweeten the pot a little bit if he's going to come back here. Call it maybe like losing pay or uncertain pay in terms of being able to contend for a Super Bowl. But his contract is up after 2026. He is the fifth highest paid edge rusher at $25 million. I'm sure he says over and over and over again that he's the best in the NFL. They say he's the best in the NFL. If that's the case, then why is he so far below Nick Bosa, who is now averaging $34 million a year? So he's going to want the pot sweetened. And so, yeah, we'll have to see how that goes. As far as Joel is concerned, I sort of feel like he's going to come back. I don't know for sure. I don't have any inside intel on that. But it's the last year of his contract coming up. And he played at a very, very high level this year, and I think that's meaningful. So if those guys tried to talk him into coming back and he sees that there's going to be some good quarterback play, that they're going to run the football, which they have to do, then I think there's a good chance he can come back too.
Mary Kay, going back to Deshaun Watson for a second, obviously it was clear. I mean, you towards the end of the press conference, you set Andrew Berry up to, fight for Deshaun Watson a little bit. You're like, if he's healthy, can he still play at an elite level? And his only answer was, Mary Kay, he's just got to get healthy. That was it. So that told me all I needed to know between the lines. But what is with the injury? Well, have you been able to find anything out in the 24 some odd hours since the press conference?
No, the only thing I did find out is that he will probably be on his way down to North Carolina to see Bob Anderson again and to try to evaluate if he needs another surgery. And if he does need this thing repaired again, I think he's out for the 2025 season. I mean, I just don't know how you can try to come back from another surgery that you're going to have in January, maybe even February after you do all your due diligence, and try to be back on the football field by the start of the season. I think that would be very difficult. But I think the Browns weren't really planning on him necessarily being their starting quarterback from the jump. If anything, maybe he would have ended up as the number 2 next season. So now those plans have kind of changed. But I do think that if you're feeling something isn't right with your ruptured Achilles, that screams to me another procedure. Not sure it's going to happen, but that's what it feels like to me right now.
Mary Kay, another injury. This JOK story is fascinating and very sad. When he first got hurt, I don't remember at the time any of us thinking it was a big deal. And I remember you coming on, I don't know if it was that week or the week after, and I feel like you were the first to say, hey, this is a bigger deal than just a typical injury. He's not coming back this year, because I didn't think any of us thought that initially. And you've been, talking about that all year. And after hearing from Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry about JOK, my concerns that you had already brought up high went through the roof, because the fact that they're still not sure all these months later if he's going to be able to play next year, and obviously beyond playing, just for his health and his life as a human being, this sucks from a football and a person standpoint. It's scary.
Yes, it really does. First and foremost, everyone is hoping the best from a health standpoint for JOK, and it's so unfortunate that this happened and that he's still having to work through whether or not he is going to be able to come back and play football. He obviously wants to. He's going around to different doctors trying to get answers. So he hopes to come back and play. But anytime we've asked the Cleveland Browns about that, all we've gotten is we're hopeful. We are hopeful, or we're hoping for it. So, that's a whole lot different than saying we're confident, we're optimistic.
Right.
They're hopeful means there is a chance, and we can say it. We can say no one knows if JOK is going to be able to make it back onto the football field after this very, very scary neck injury. Again, the Browns are all hopeful. I know that he's hopeful, and all of Browns fans are too. So hopefully he can. But for right now, no one knows the answer to that.
Mary Kay, we know the Browns are in the process of hiring a new offensive coordinator. Do you have a sense of what qualities Kevin Stefanski may be looking for in this next hire? Does it have to be someone he's worked with before? Does it have to be someone who has play calling experience? Is that all up in the air? What sense do you get in terms of what Kevin's looking for in terms of making this hire?
Whoever can come in and help him run an explosive offense. That is what he's looking for. They have to be able to obviously score some points. That's what they really, really need right now. So that's what he's got to look for. Anything else, there are no hard and fast rules on what he's looking for. It doesn't have to be somebody he's worked with. It doesn't have to be somebody with OC experience or play calling experience. It has to be a bright offensive mind who can get the most out of their next quarterback and this whole entire offense. What I think they need is alignment on the offensive side of the ball. Everyone has to be working in concert, and no one really was this year. No one was on the same page with what they were trying to do, and it just was a dysfunctional mess. And that's so sad. It really is, because they had some talent on this football team, and they just weren't able to maximize any of it. So, except for maybe Jerry Jeudy. I mean, you can honestly say that Jerry Jeudy had a great season, and so we're seeing there was off to a really good start before he missed the final 6 games of the season with a concussion, which is another concern on this football team right now. But I think really just looking for a really bright mind. You have to find one of those next Kevin O'Connells or someone in that Sean McVay realm or family, someone that is just a brilliant offensive mind, play caller perhaps, that can come in here and get the Browns on a points scoring track.
Speaking of play caller, if you had to bet right now, what's your best guess as to whether Kevin will go back to calling plays or not? Or does it depend on who he hires?
It totally depends on who he hires. If he hires someone that has play calling experience and ability, he will willingly turn that over, just like he did mid-season to Ken Dorsey. So I don't think that's an issue for him at all. I think he will absolutely be willing to do that for the right person. So he'll keep it himself or take it back himself if that's what's best for the football team. But if he finds someone who, and a lot of times you have to give play calling to the coordinator or they're not going to come here. The best and brightest coordinators in the NFL are probably going to require some form of play calling, whether it's a collaboration or whether they're doing it outright from the jump. But you're not going to get somebody that's absolutely amazing and not at least consider giving them that chore.
Mary Kay, and you hear the way Andrew Berry talked about it. And he said, we get it. It wasn't good enough. This was a bad season by so many different metrics. Do you feel like they're going to have a renewed sense of, not to say that they were asleep at the wheel or anything, but do you think they'll have a renewed sense of urgency about the results, the wins, the losses, some of the different things? Because next year, you look at it, I would assume that most people that watch the Browns believe that they're already starting off at an 8 or a 9 when it comes to the hot seat meter, given the fact that they won 3 games this year. Do you think that they'll have a just newfound sense of urgency about getting things taken care of and winning games?
Yes, and I think what happened last year is that they got a little bit too complacent with their record, with their number 1 defense. They ran it back in some areas where they didn't need to do that, where they needed to add, and that they needed to continue to be very, very aggressive with player acquisition in certain spots. I thought they needed a surefire double-digit sacker to go with Myles Garrett in 2024. I thought, okay, Jerry Jeudy's a nice start, but you need to add another Pro Bowl caliber receiver. You can never have too many. I thought that they put too many eggs in Nick Chubb basket, and thinking that Nick Chubb could come back and be your workhorse based on everything that he went through. Then you look at the offensive tackles. I think they overestimated the ability of Jack Conklin, Jed Wills, and DeJuan Jones to come back from their knee injuries. So I think there were some mistakes that were made in terms of the personnel decisions in the offseason, and they have to be very, very careful going forward that they don't make those same mistakes, and they have to do everything they can. And people in the building need to be willing to speak up. I mean, you can't sit back and watch things happen if you see that, hey, maybe we really ought to do this. I mean, they have to be willing to listen. They have to speak up.
Mary, I want to ask you about Andy Dickerson. Obviously, they hired him last year as the offensive line coach. And then I read that Mike Vrabel was down there being like the offensive line coach. So my question is, what did Andy Dickerson do this season?
Well, I'll tell you what. First of all, in the beginning of the season, and it was a challenge in the beginning of the season because he didn't have those tackles, and he was playing with the fourth and fifth offensive tackles. So it was a tough gig right from the start, trying to replace and fill those shoes of Bill Callahan. But in the beginning, Mike Vrabel was working with the tight ends a lot. And then it became apparent that he was needed more with the offensive linemen. And it did seem odd that you'd look in the very early part of practice and it was like Andy Dickerson was off to the side and Roy Ivstan and Mike Vrabel were very, very hands-on in the coaching in the early part when we were able to watch practice. So Andy was there. He was involved. He was also coaching. But you saw Mike get more involved with those guys like he had been earlier with the tight ends. But I wouldn't necessarily characterize it that he was 100% coaching the offensive line. I think he was spending most of his time there, and it was sort of a team effort at that point, or O-line by committee.
Nicely said.
Yeah. Last thing, Mary Kay, Nick Chubb, I can't remember who asked the question about Nick Chubb in Barry's press conference, but unlike Myles Garrett, I know Myles still has a contract where he said, hey, for Myles, it's going to be Cleveland to Canton. With Nick Chubb, he wasn't as certain that Nick Chubb will be back. What do you expect in terms of his future?
Well, I think we could all look out there and see that Nick Chubb was not the Nick Chubb we all remembered when he played this season. And we all hoped that it was just because it was his first year back. But he's also getting older. Running backs start to slow down a little bit. There's a lot of wear and tear on their bodies. So you never know. A lot of times the second year back from a major surgery like that is your better season than the first one back. But you don't know if it's going to be like that with Nick Chubb because he's going to be then, of course, another year older. But we'll have to see how it goes. It sounds to me right now as though he were almost saying it's over, it's pretty much over, it's done. The only way he would come back now at this point would be sort of on a veteran, more type minimum type contract or a very incentive-laden contract where he could try to make up some of the kind of money that he believes that he's worth, or maybe he'll go somewhere else and see if he can give someone else another good year or two. So it opens the door for Nick Chubb no longer being.
Thanks, Mary Kay. As always, great season. We appreciate you taking the time.
Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for having me.
You got it.
I'll try to get the Christmas tree down by next year.